Welcome to the first segment here on Cal's Corner radio show on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is, once again, Rob McConnell. Welcome back, folks. As you know, if you are a regular listener to the show, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal, which is a wide variety of subjects, of course. And today we're going to talk about what is probably the greatest news item in the last few days, and it probably will remain such for the foreseeable future until it is probably bumped off in the news coverage-wise, the summit coming up between American President Donald Trump and, of course, the dictator of North Korea. They will meet in June in Singapore. But before we get to that, let's talk about what has been happening in the last few days. A lot of events, especially in the Middle East, and these have global ramifications, as much of what happens in the Middle East constantly does. It turns out that Trump has kept one of his longtime campaign promises to drop or get out of the Iranian nuclear deal, which he said, understandably, we have to separate our emotions from facts here, and even though you may emotionally like the Iranian deal, the fact remains that it was always seriously flawed. I am one of the few reporters who has reported on that fact constantly. In fact, I have even called former President Barack Obama and John Kerry liars, because they have been, where it concerns trying to sell the public the Iran deal. They have outright lied about it, and we'll get back to that in just a moment. But to make a long story short, Trump kept his promise to withdraw from the nuclear deal. Iran, of course, began threatening immediately to resume its uranium enrichment program unsupervised if this were to happen. And you have to kind of wonder about that and shake your head about it, because out of one side of their mouth, Iran says that their nuclear program is purely for peaceful purposes. Now, let's say for a moment that you actually believe what Iran says, which would be a foolish thing to do since they have lied repeatedly about their so-called peaceful purposes. They claim they are not interested in developing nuclear weapons. They've even said that having nuclear weapons is un-Islamic, quote unquote. And of course, they pride themselves on being Islamic good boys, even though they hang homosexuals and force women to cover themselves. That's how righteous they are. Anyway, so they say, we don't have any intention to make a bomb. We never did. We know that is a lie. It has been a lie ever since they've said it. Yet they're already threatening to enrich uranium up to bomb-grade levels if this deal were to be canceled. It has been canceled by the United States and its partners, which means the other signatory countries especially, and other companies around the world have about anywhere from 60 to 90 days, as much as 6 months, to now get compliant with the list of sanctions that the United States is reimposing on Iran. And while the Europeans are trying to continue to keep the deal going with Iran, realistically, they're not going to be able to do that. In the meantime, you have for the first time actual warfare that has broken out between the State of Israel and Iran. They have been attacking each other's military interests. Iran so far has come out on the losing side of that, and we'll get to that in a few minutes as well. So as you can see, we've got a lot to cover. It all ends and begins with the nuclear deal. So let's briefly recap it, why it was a bad deal to begin with, why the American public was lied to, as well as the world about it, from Obama and Kerry, which is inexcusable, doesn't matter what the subject is, and why it is that Trump kept his promise to pull out of it, and now that is a done deal. Now, we must remember that over the years, the United States has imposed sanctions on various countries. In the case of Iran, sanctions were imposed against that country, especially since radical Islamic militants took over that country, led by Ayatollah Khomeini. And what they did, and a lot of young people just don't know this because they're not being taught proper history in today's schools, but they actually took and held for 444 days slightly over 50 American embassy workers, diplomats, people who worked in the embassy there, and yes, some of them were spies. Every embassy does have spies. They were held hostage for 444 days, and they were only released as Ronald Reagan was coming into power and Jimmy Carter was exiting the White House. And the reason that the Iranians took Americans hostage and held them illegally against their will, violated all diplomatic norms, is because they were upset that Jimmy Carter had agreed to allow the Shah of Iran to undergo some emergency cancer treatment. In the minds of the Iranian regime, they wanted the Shah returned to their country for trial, which is an understandable request, by the way, considering the atrocities that the Shah committed, even on behalf of the United States. We have to remember that the Shah of Iran was put into power in the 1950s when he was a young man by the United States in a coup that was led by the CIA. It was actually prompted by the British, who didn't have the resources to pull it off, so they convinced President Eisenhower to go ahead and put a puppet regime in Iran, and they ousted his brother and put the Shah of Iran in power. He was essentially America's strongest ally in the area, other than Israel, for decades. And then, of course, the Islamic Revolution took place, which put Khomeini in power. They wanted the Shah put on trial. He fled to Panama. He died of cancer, and he was never put on trial for his atrocities. In anger, doesn't mean it was right. It was the wrong thing to do. The Iranian government, led by so-called students, although they were encouraged by the intelligence community of Iran and the government itself, took hostages. They stormed the U.S. embassy, took diplomatic personnel, held them for 444 days, and relations between the U.S. and Iran went downhill from there. And they've never really fully recovered. Even with the Iran deal, if it had been renewed by Trump, they're still death to America as far as their official propaganda goes. They're still calling the U.S. the great Satan. They call Israel the little Satan. It's the same tired shtick that America is the evil source of everything bad in the world. This is the kind of nonsense that these guys spew out. But of course, there are enough people out there who are dumb enough to believe it, especially in the Middle East, when there might not be a lot going for you and you don't know any better because your broadcasts are censored. And of course, they are censored and state-controlled in Iran. Now, what has happened in the decades since the height of the tensions between the United States and Iran, ever since Reagan took power and, of course, the American workers were eventually released, is the regime went on to sponsor terrorist acts against Israel, against the United States, murdering Americans in Lebanon. They continued sponsoring terrorism to this day. They, of course, are responsible, the Iranian regime, for propping up Syria's brutal dictator, Bashar al-Assad. If it were not for the efforts of Iran and Russia, Assad would not be in power today. And if you look at Israel as a neighbor to Syria, of course, it's concerned over what happens in Syria and anywhere in the Middle East. Iran's regime is a existential threat. Let's be honest with you. In other words, if you have one government telling the world, we want to wipe Israel off the map, that's an existential threat to Israel. It's kind of obvious. Remember in the Cold War days, when former Soviet Union dictator Nikita Khrushchev stood up at the United Nations, famously beating his shoe and saying, "We will bury you." He was referring to the West. That wasn't exactly a greeting of love and kindness, was it? So when Iran holds a national holiday called Jerusalem Day, which celebrates the liberation of Jerusalem by the Muslims, and all the Jews are driven into the sea. In other words, they're killed or exterminated the way that Hitler exterminated them during the Holocaust in World War II. They actually celebrate that day as a holiday every year in Iran, and that's when they troll out the American flags and the Israeli flags to be burned, and they burn effigies. And you have to see what happened the other day in the parliament. Iran's official parliament, in front of the cameras, several of their lawmakers eagerly lit American flags on fire, shouted condemnations and death to America for canceling the nuclear deal. Gee, how right and spiritual and fun-loving and well-wishing the Iranian regime is to the United States especially. And this is one of the ironies of the Iran deal. Because if you look at it, it is essentially a reward for trying to blackmail the world. And I've said this before as a journalist only because it's true. You have to remember that Iran is a signatory to the Non-Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, or NPT for short. by law, they're not supposed to make nuclear weapons. In exchange for agreeing not to make them as a signatory to the NPT, what they get access to, or any country who signs the NPT, is they get access to nuclear technologies that allow them to do everything except make weapons. So in exchange for following only a peaceful course of action, the modern nuclear program, which is really an extension from Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, which was started in the 50s, they're not supposed to make weapons. Iran was making a nuclear bomb. They may still be doing it today. We don't know. That's one of the problems with the agreement. We don't know what we can't know, and we don't know what we're not allowed to ask about. I'll get back to that point after the break here. And what Iran is being rewarded for is to be paid billions of dollars to be part of the international community again in exchange for staying legal and not making nuclear weapons. Now, to me, that's as bad as paying people not to rob a bank. I mean, if you can be paid millions of dollars not to break the law, where can I sign up for that gig? If everyone had it that easy. So I've never been a fan of the Iran agreement because it has been flawed. Our leadership did not need to lie about it, but they did. And after the break here, we'll get into some details as to why it is flawed and what is now happening between Iran and Israel and the war that has broken out between these two countries. We'll be back after this break.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Israel.com.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, what happened exactly to cause Trump to cancel the Iranian nuclear deal? Well, first of all, when he ran for president against Hillary Clinton, he said he was going to do this. He said it was one of the worst deals he'd ever seen. And while that might be an exaggeration, he was right that it is seriously flawed. But there was a specific event that did occur, which captured much of the media's attention, that happened just days before Trump decided to issue an order to withdraw from the agreement. And what happened is it all began when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu walked toward some exhibits that he intended to show, which, as he began his speech, were covered in black tarps. He oozed self-confidence. And why shouldn't he? His intelligence agency, Mossad, had just pulled off an amazing top-secret operation, the likes of which have never been achieved before. And if anyone listening to this is familiar with the history of Mossad, they have plenty of unprecedented James Bond-type actions that they have pulled off over the years. Mossad is considered to be probably the greatest intelligence agency of any country on the planet. The difference between what they have done versus, say, a James Bond movie is James Bond's not real, Mossad is. So what Netanyahu did is he dropped his global political bombshell when he announced from Israel's Ministry of Defense that Israeli intelligence, that would be Mossad, had obtained copies of a top-secret documents and imagery which proves that Iran has lied about its secret rogue nuclear weapons program over the years. Now, while Netanyahu mentioned that over 100,000 documents and image files, including videos, were captured and are now in Israeli possession, the real number may actually be closer to 500,000 if certain reports about this seized material are true. Now, the key message in Netanyahu's speech could not be more blunt. Netanyahu is a very good speaker, but he's also a very blunt individual. It's two words: Iran lied. Now, not only did Netanyahu prove this fact in his presentation that Iran did lie, it lasted about slightly more than 20 minutes. Let's review a few facts real quickly where it concerns the Iranian nuclear deal. We'll call it the IND for short. That was currently in effect until American President Donald Trump just pulled out of it. Now, we must remember that Iran has denied ever having a nuclear weapons program. Okay? They've always denied it. Their claim has always been a lie. Since in the late 1980s, it was the Ayatollah Khomeini who originally authorized Iran to make nuclear bombs, and he did this at the urging of Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, who was then Iran's Speaker of Parliament. He had held that position for about 9 years' time. And this was during the end of the war, when Iran was fighting against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Now, there was this phase of it where Khomeini says, okay, we have to make our own weapons of mass destruction, because you have to remember that Saddam Hussein had used them against Iran with devastating effect. So as part of trying to get their hands on nukes, what Iran did is they approached the country of Pakistan. All right. Now, I am one of several journalists who has exposed this connection in the past. I was in India at the time when the news of this became official. But we have to remember that it was from the country of Pakistan that Iran first hoped to outright purchase rogue nuclear bombs assembled and ready to go. Their intention was to buy them from renegade scientist, the now disgraced Dr. Abdul Khan, who is known in Pakistan by his supporters as being Pakistan's father of the atomic bomb. We have to remember that Khan played a key role in smuggling out centrifuge parts and engineering blueprints, which he got copies of when he briefly worked for the Urenco company in the Netherlands. In other words, Khan was a scientist there, an engineer, and since Urenco enriches uranium, he was able to steal actual centrifuge components and blueprints that would tell an engineer how to make a nuclear centrifuge. And this was equipment which he then smuggled back to Pakistan before authorities could catch up with him. And of course, Pakistan would never cough him up once they had the goods. They, in fact, loved him for it because his thievery allowed Pakistan to develop their own nuclear weapons. So Khan was not only corrupt, which is quite common among Pakistani officials. Khan found the black market for rogue nukes to be so lucrative that he ended up supplying Iran, Libya, and communist North Korea with his illegal wares. So in 2005, Pakistan's information minister, this would be Sheikh Rashid Ahmed, publicly admitted, and this is a quote, Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan gave some centrifuges to Iran. He helped Iran in his personal capacity, and the Pakistan government had nothing to do with it, unquote. Now, Dr. Khan would later be pardoned by former Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf, who's no longer in power, and this was after he had confessed a year earlier to supplying rogue nuclear-related equipment to both Iran, Libya, and North Korea. So the question now becomes, if Iran never had nuclear weapons program, and they never intended to acquire nuclear weapons, then why did they go try to buy them ready to go from Pakistan? And when they couldn't buy them ready to go from Pakistan, why did then Dr. Khan sell Iran the first pieces necessary so that they knew how to enrich uranium and would be forced, based on the engineering blueprints, to design their own centrifuges? Why would they do this if they weren't going to build a nuclear bomb? The logic here is obvious. If I'm not interested in getting nukes, I'm not going to go shopping for them, am I? Do you ever shop for things in the store that you don't want? No. You go for things you're interested in, and they were interested in buying ready-to-made nuclear weapons. So the answer to this obvious question is, why would they go want to buy these things if they were never interested in them, is that Iran lied, just as Netanyahu had said. Now I'm going to give you 3 quotes now. Now, this is from the leadership of the top 3 figures that currently run the government of Iran. First quote says, "I stress that the Islamic Republic has never been after nuclear weapons." Now, this is a statement by Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who succeeded Ayatollah Khomeini, okay? And what Khamenei said was, again, an outright lie. Now, here's another quote. "Nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction have no place in Iran's security and defense." Okay? Now, this is what this was said by Iran's president, Hassan Rouhani. He said that it was against their doctrine, it contradicts our fundamental religious and ethical convictions, and he said this in front of the United Nations, and this is the president of Iran. So here you have Ayatollah Khamenei saying, "I promise you we've never tried to get them." Then we have the president saying to even have them would be against everything we stand for, so we're not going to go there. And then you have Javad Zarif, the main negotiator for the Iranian deal. He said in an interview that he did with PBS, he said, quote, "We didn't have any program to develop nuclear weapons." Again, he says, we didn't have any program to develop nuclear weapons. Anyway, we consider nuclear weapons both irrational as well as immoral. Now, again, that's Iran's foreign minister, Mr. Zarif. He's the one that, likes to dress in the Western suits, does not wear a turban, always smiles before the camera, says wonderful kissy-lovey-dovey things. But, of course, he's lying through his teeth, just like the other 2 Iranian leaders are. Now, again, these quotes were made by the top 3 Iranian leaders, and they're all blatant, brazen lies. For the world now not only knows that Iran had and still is operating a rogue nuclear weapons program, we even know the name of this program now, thanks to what Netanyahu disclosed, thanks to the thousands of documents that Mossad was able to smuggle out of Iran. The name of Iran's nuclear weapons program is Project Ahmad. Okay, A-M-A-D. So let me give you the brief history of Project Ahmad. In 2003, Iran's Minister of Defense, now this would be Ali Shamkhani, ordered that Project Ahmad be divided into 2 parts. He called one part an overt part and the other one a covert one, meaning secret. So on October 25th, 2003, Dr. Mohsen Farizadeh, who was then the director of Ahmad, gave orders that publicly, keyword publicly here, folks, Project Ahmad was being disclosed, and then it was going to be closed. And this move has been Iran's official shtick since then, that essentially it gave up, quote-unquote, developing rogue nukes out of consideration, in part, for the USA's invasion of neighboring Iraq, the formal justification of which was to destroy Saddam Hussein's alleged weapons of mass destruction. So while Project Ahmad was publicly disclosed, its covert part was still operates in secrecy today, is overseen by an Iranian unit known as SPND, which is run by the same Dr. Fakhrizadeh, who still remains its director over 15 years later. Now, this individual is very interesting because he's not a sweet and innocent type. In fact, Dr. Fakhrizadeh's specialty is in nuclear physics, and his specific specialty is in miniaturizing nuclear warheads. And you have to look at what Iran has done. They have been developing miniaturized nuclear warheads that can be fit onto their medium and long-range ballistic missiles. And, of course, they have improved those missiles like the Shahab-3, which has a range of over 1,000 kilometers. Now, you must remember that nuclear warheads are useless if they cannot be delivered by reliable delivery systems. Ballistic missiles, of course, make perfect delivery systems. So we'll be back after this commercial break, and we'll continue with our episode about Iran's nuclear deal.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, After the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to segment 3 here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. We're talking about Iran's secret nuclear weapons program. We've proven that their top leadership, the top 3 guys that are running that country, have all lied about saying that, oh no, we were never after nuclear weapons, I promise you. And even if we had them, they are unethical. They're against what we stand for. We wouldn't go there. Again, lies, like Netanyahu said. Iran lied. And that was the perfect name for his show, or for his presentation that he gave. So we must remember that the documents released by Israel prove that Iran never wholly abandoned their rogue nuclear weapons program. What they did instead is they broke it up into 2 pieces. The first piece went public, and then they said, we were doing research, but we shut it down. Okay. What they didn't say is that the program actually continued in a clandestine, top secret, covert mode. And we know that because we have the documents now that gave that order for the program to be broken up, the public part to be held out to dry, to mislead the world, and then, of course, the overt part, or covert part, rather, where it would remain a secret, run under the Ministry of Defense. And that's a key caveat here, folks, because one of the severe flaws of the Iranian nuclear deal, which Trump objected to, and he's right to not like this part. In fact, shame on Obama and Kerry for thinking this was okay, because it wasn't. We must remember that Iran has never been required to come clean about its past nuclear weapons activities. Now, this was a condition the U.S. was pushing for a long time. But near the end of the negotiations, as the clock was running out, John Kerry caved in. Obama caved in and said, Iran doesn't have to come clean. It's not important anymore. And Kerry made that announcement in June of 2015. He literally told the media, I remember because I reported on it, that it wasn't important what Iran did in the past. That's just plain ridiculous, but that's John Kerry and the Obama administration. And so what happened is Iran was let off the hook, and that caused entire areas of the country to never be inspected. In other words, there were a few laboratories that the International Atomic Energy Agency had identified as to where the warhead miniaturization tests had to have been conducted. There was evidence that they had been, but they were not allowed to be inspected by inspectors. So in the Iranian agreement, military facilities are off limits. They're not allowed to be inspected. And of course, who runs the military installations? The Ministry of Defense. So you have to know, common sense, Logic 101, that the covert or secret aspect of their nuclear weapons program is not only on a military base. That military base, the fact it's on a military base means it cannot be inspected. So how can you say with a straight face that you know that Iran is being compliant with a nuclear deal? Well, you can't really say that with certainty. Instead, what you can say, which is an important caveat, is of what we're allowed to inspect, they seem like they're not cheating, but since we can't really inspect everything that we should be able to, we can't say with certainty that they're not cheating. And that's probably the biggest flaw in the Iran nuclear deal, is that it didn't really prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. What it did is essentially pay them off so that they would delay doing it by many years, and it kicked the political can down the road, not just past 1 or 2 terms in office, but basically 2.5 terms in office. Because you have to consider something here. The Democrats, and probably most Americans, likely thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president. Let's assume that she had won the White House instead of Trump, and that she had served 2 terms in office, although she'd be nearly 1,000 years old by the time she got out of her second term. The point is that whoever succeeded her, if she served 2 terms, and it was a continuation of a Obama, Democrat, Clinton administration, 2 terms for Obama, then 2 theoretically for Clinton, the Iranian deal would have expired about 10 years later, and whoever succeeded Clinton, the anointed one at the time, at least seemingly so in the minds of voters, would have to put up with the consequences of that deal expiring. In other words, Clinton would have gotten a free pass, or any Democratic candidate. Instead, Trump won the election, much to the surprise of many, and he announced from day one he was going to kill the deal, and he has now done so. Now, let's talk about another key area of how Iran has violated or gotten away with stuff they shouldn't have been allowed to in the Iranian nuclear agreement. We must remember that Iran is prohibited from making ballistic missiles under the terms of the agreement that can carry miniaturized nuclear warheads. They're prevented from doing this, yet they continue to do it. Iran has paraded at least 3 new missile designs in the last year and a half, including an improved Shahab 3. And based on the documents that Israel has released, as well as actual photos showing that the actual lab work was being done, and we only know this because of the leaks from Israel. This was data that nobody else had seen outside of people who were privy to Iran's nuclear weapons program. We know that they conducted warhead miniaturization experiments. We've seen the imagery of that. Israel has published the engineering blueprints, and of course, those miniaturized warheads can fit on any of the latest ballistic missiles that Iran has been developing. And Iran is breaking the agreement, clearly. There's no question about that. Iran's attitude, though, is that since we're not designing them for nukes, but they avoid the issue of could a nuke be retrofitted onto the warhead of that machine or that missile, they're saying, well, we're not in violation of it, and we have a right to make missiles for defensive purposes. Yes, they do. Absolutely they do. But when you make a missile that has a range of a few thousand kilometers, that is not a defensive missile, especially when your country isn't nowhere near that big. Instead, it is an offensive weapon. And Iran has had the ability for years now to hit almost all of Europe, even parts of Russia, with their ballistic missiles. And while Russia isn't worried about Iran because they're a key weapons supplier, they actually built the nuclear reactor for the Iranians and helped them with their nuclear program. The fact is that the U.S. decided to put anti-missile defense systems in Europe as a deterrent against anything that Iran might do, because they realized that the new emerging threat in the post-9/11 world order, if you will, the 9/11 terrorist attacks is what I'm referring to, was no longer just Russia and the Cold War and the United States or even China. It actually is these emerging rogue nations like Pakistan or Iran that could develop sufficient ballistic missiles combined with nuclear weapons to suddenly destabilize the world. And that view is correct. So let's talk about another area that they have made a key advancement in. We have to remember, and this is something that Kerry and Obama never really spoke about, another key area that Iran has used to cheat the spirit of the Iran nuclear deal has to do with its continuing development of not only nuclear-capable missiles, but specifically nuclear cruise missiles. And cruise missiles are an interesting type of weapon because they are exempt under the terms of the Iranian deal. And Kerry and Obama agreed to that, and it's inexcusable. Cruise missiles are very interesting in that they don't require an arc trajectory to get to their target. What they do is they fly at much slower speeds, and they fly along the contours of the terrain. In fact, the most advanced cruise missiles can actually have their targets changed in the middle of their flight, and they can go take out a different target than what they were originally intended or designed to do when they were launched. A regular ballistic missile cannot do that. It needs an arc, and it's better at much further targets. So what Iran did is they approached some rogue weapons dealers in Ukraine. And in about 17 years ago, around the year 2000, they bought 12 Soviet-era Kh-55 cruise missiles, which have a range of 1,860 miles. That's a fair distance. And the Kh-55 is a cruise missile that the Soviets made. Ukraine had a lot of them. 12 of them were illegally sold to Iran. And then Iran started reverse engineering them. And to this day, Iran has managed to develop, with the help of having these weapons as a engineering blueprint, they've developed now their own indigenous cruise missiles, which will be able to carry miniaturized nuclear warheads. These would be warheads that will be smaller than the ones that would fit on their Shahab-3 ballistic missile. Now, since cruise missiles are not ballistic missiles, and they're distinctly different, they're not classified in the same way, cruise missiles are exempt from the Iranian nuclear deal. Iran is able to make all of them and say, well, it's not a ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead, so it's okay, and technically that loophole exists, but it does violate the spirit of the agreement. If they're not working on nuclear weapons at all, they shouldn't be working on cruise missiles that can carry nuclear warheads, but they are. So because the Obama administration caved on that issue, John Kerry caved on it, that is the way that things stand. Now, as we go through this here, let's talk about lies. We know that Iran did lie by saying they never had a nuclear weapons program, that just having the ideas against their morals, etc. Again, those are lies. We also have to call out former President Barack Obama, because on August 5th, 2015, he said, and this is a quote, "After 2 years of negotiations, we have achieved a detailed arrangement that permanently prohibits Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. It cuts off all of Iran's pathways to a bomb. It contains the most comprehensive verification regime ever negotiated to monitor a nuclear program." We'll come back to what Obama said in just a minute.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes. finds a locket or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. Once again, the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. So, folks, we were talking about what Obama had said when he literally lied to the world in one of his speeches about the Iran nuclear deal. What he said on August 5th, 2015 was, after 2 years of negotiations, we have achieved a detailed arrangement that permanently prohibits Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Now, remember, he said we have achieved a detailed arrangement that permanently prohibits Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Obama then went on to say it cuts off all of Iran's pathways to a bomb. It contains the most comprehensive verification regime ever negotiated to monitor a nuclear program. Now, that is what Obama said. I didn't make up those words. They're available, easily searchable in a speech he gave from the White House while President Joe Biden looked over his shoulder. And it all sounds great. Wow, Iran has been permanently cut off from making nukes. That's wonderful stuff. Let's throw a party. Only it was a lie, okay? Because the terms in the Iranian agreement have a sunset date of anywhere from 10 to 15 years. That's it. Now, imagine if this were medical science, and I was your doctor, and I said, we have permanently cured your disease. You won't have to worry about it for another 10 or 15 years. Well, you say, well, wait a minute, you just said permanently. Well, yeah, permanently, 10 or 15 years. Well, the word permanently does not mean 10 or 15 years. Even if you're Barack Obama, it doesn't mean that. It's a lie. Look up the word permanently. It means forever or everlasting. It means eternal. Now, if you look up the opposite word of permanent, the opposite word of permanent is temporary. So one is permanent, it means it lasts forever, it's eternal, and the other is temporary, which means it lasts for a finite period of time, one that is undefined. We call that temporary. And in the case of the Iranian nuclear deal, it's 10 to 15 years, with the last of the restrictions easing after 25 years. So how could Obama say this was a permanent solution when it's obvious it's not? I don't know. This is the same Obama who told millions of people nearly 40 times that if they loved their doctor and their health care plan, they could keep it. No one will ever take it away from you. No way. And yet, as millions of Americans found out, their doctor and medical plan were taken away from them. And he lied about that. In fact, the Washington Post and PolitiFact called it Lie of the Year and called him out on it. And to this day, there are still people I know who love Obama and say he didn't lie, even though he did. And they don't think he lied about this, even though he did. You have to remember that Obama knew the details of this nuclear deal. He even wrote part of the speech that he gave about it. He was proud of his moment in the sun. And maybe for once he'd think he actually may have earned his Nobel Prize. I don't know. But to say something is permanently when it's only good for 10 or 15 years, that's just a lie. Let's be honest about it. Now, Obama also lied when he said that there were snap inspections that were part of the Iranian nuclear deal. That's even a worse lie because there's no relative issue here. The definition of a snap inspection is very clear. A snap inspection is an inspection that an inspector can make at a moment's notice. He doesn't need to justify it. He doesn't even need to tell you why he's doing it. He says, I want to see this, I want to see it now. You have to show it to him now. That's a snap inspection. That is different than a scheduled inspection. Well, all one has to do is look at the terms of the Iranian nuclear deal. There's no such thing as snap inspections. They are not allowed. In fact, what Obama called snap inspections They've never been part of the deal. In fact, if inspectors want to see an Iranian facility, which of course cannot be on a military base, they have to give 24 days advance notice. That's over 3 weeks. And they have to put it in writing. And if Iran doesn't agree that they should be snap inspected 24 days ahead of time, then Iran just says no. And the issue goes before one of countless UN set up committees where at least 5 nations have to agree that Iran needs to be inspected at this location 24 days ahead of time. That, again, why even use the term snap inspections? He should have just said on-site inspections or something that wasn't a lie, but that's not what Obama did. And then he says that he talked about there would be constant video surveillance. Yes, there is. But what Obama doesn't tell you, neither did John Kerry, is that surveillance wasn't live. In other words, the way the surveillance of nuclear sites works in Iran is they have a video camera running. And every day or two, they give that tape to the UN agency. They view that tape, and then they decide whether there's cheating going on or not. Now, because Iran records that tape, they have custody of it. They give it to inspectors. And it's not live. It's handed a day or two later. There's no real-time monitoring of anything. So what are you monitoring? You're not. You're looking at a recording that was made a day or two earlier. You're not really monitoring anything in any credible sense of the word. And yet that is exactly what the Iranian agreement calls for, and it was deemed to be okay. Now, these are, again, just a few of the flaws that exist in the agreement. It is why Trump wanted it renegotiated, and he's right to view that way. The problem is Iran says there's not going to be any renegotiations. Case closed. So clearly one side has to give. Trump has laid his cards out on behalf of the United States. It has upset European allies. It has upset people who apologize for the brutality of the Iranian regime. You know, on social media, I'm in touch with a lot of people on Facebook, and I'm surprised at the ignorance of how Iran's system works. I hear all the time from modern so-called progressive liberals that Iran has a democracy. No, they don't. Not in any credible sense of the word. Because although you are free to file to run for political office in Iran, if you don't pass the test of the Guardian or the Council of Guardians, you're not going to be allowed to run for any office. So by the time an election is finally held in Iran, where people actually go to vote among the contenders, every one of those politicians who is trying to get your vote has had to have been approved by Ayatollah Khamenei's inner circle. If they haven't been approved, their name's not going to be on the ballot. That is not a free, fair, and open from the grounds up democracy. And of course, the very definition of an Ayatollah in Iranian society, where let's distinguish it, Iranian Islamic militant society versus, say, the more modern secular version of Iranian society that was in place under the Shah of Iran, where women were not forced to cover. There were movie theaters back then. They could wear makeup. They didn't have to, again, cover themselves. They were more treated like equals. They even wore bikinis and short skirts if they wanted to. They were not penalized. Homosexuals were not killed back then like they are today in Iran. That society is not a living, viable, breathing democracy. It is instead a brutal dictatorship run by a theocracy. And an Ayatollah, by definition, is a person without sin. And there's no such person. Everybody sins. You couldn't be human and not sin. Yet we're told to believe that the Ayatollahs are sinless. It's just pure nonsense, but that's how that system works. So why then does Israel want Iran's nuclear program destroyed? Because like the United States, they believe that Iran's capability to make a nuclear weapon should not exist in the first place. It cannot exist if they're going to be a signatory of the NPT, and they are. And under the terms of the NPT, if you try to make weapons, the UN Security Council can take action against you, even military action, and even overthrow your regime. They have the right to do that. So The critics of the agreement, and I'm one of them, agree that the ability for Iran to make a nuclear bomb should be permanently extinguished so that it is a permanent solution, that they can never do it. The world doesn't have to worry the issue. And other countries like Saudi Arabia won't also start a nuclear arms race because there'll be no need to. But they've made it clear that if Iran isn't stopped, they're going to have the bomb as well. And the last thing we need is another nuclear weapons arms race. So that's where things stand right now. And what has happened is Israel has been attacking targets in Syria, wiping out Iranian infrastructure, because Iran has been using Syrian territory to set up forward bases to further its regional conquest, and Israel will not allow that to happen. Israel fired 70-something missiles to wipe out a lot of Iranian targets. So far, Iran has not fired back. Hours earlier, Iran had attacked Israel in a rocket strike. Most of those rockets ended up causing no damage. Israel struck back, and now that's where things stand. A whole lot of people are going to be talking to both countries, hoping that things do not escalate. We must remember that Israel and Iran have never fought a direct war ever in their history. But what has happened is they've now come into conflict over this, and the timing of this, of course, is not coincidental. Iran started firing their rockets after the nuclear deal was rejected, and they're throwing basically a temper tantrum. So should the world reward them so that they don't make nukes? No. The world should remove their capability of ever making nuclear weapons, and if Iran wants a war, if that's what is necessary to stop them, well, I'm not one to advocate war, but I do believe in the maxim that what is necessary is always wise. It was necessary to fight World War II to stop Hitler and Imperial Japan. It was also necessary to fight the British if America wanted its own independence. It was also necessary to fight World War I as well. Those wars were fought and they were won because they were fought for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. We'll be back next week with another episode of Cal's Corner here on the X Zone Broadcast Network.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.